A few weeks back, I had the chance to travel down to Liverpool and spend a little bit of time with Tony and Chris Griffiths from The Real People. And while I was there, we actually made 2 videos. The first was them and Diggsy talking about their experiences with Oasis. But the second video was this one, the story of The Real People themselves. Of course, there's far more to The Real People story than just the Oasis connection, and they have some incredible stories from behind the scenes and out on the road during their long career. So today, join me, Chris and Tony to recount the story of one of the most important underground British indie bands of the 90s, The Real People. As young lads, Chris and Tony rented a rehearsal space in Pownall Square in Liverpool, and there they spent all their time hanging out with friends and practicing music. At that time, the up-and-coming band in Liverpool was The Lars, who were also looking for a suitable rehearsal space.
Yeah, well, this was originally our studio that we had in about 1988. It was like a pracky room, but this is where we met The Lars. And there was many a good time out.
Yeah, this is Pownall Square in Liverpool.
And so, the Lars and the Griffiths brothers met when the Lars offered to take over their lease for the Pownall Square rehearsal room. But now, Chris and Tony needed a new space in which to rehearse, so they relocated to the Marsh Lane Community Centre in Bootle. And after having met the Lars, they began searching for other like-minded musicians so they could form a band as well. And so, shortly afterwards, Sean Simpson joined on rhythm guitar, Tony Elson joined on drums, and so the first incarnation of The Real People was formed. The band began performing at Marsh Lane every Tuesday as a residential gig, as well as pubs and clubs around Bootle and Liverpool. And so a buzz began to grow around the band. They recorded their first demo in 1988 at Alchemy Studios in Liverpool with friend of the band John Murphy as engineer and producer. Sean Morgan became their first manager, and because he worked at Liverpool Polytechnic, he was able to get them gigs in that same venue, supporting many of the biggest UK indie acts of the time, including the Stone Roses and the band they'd met earlier, The Lars.
We'd started working with a guy called Sean Morgan, who was like the music promoter. Because he was like sort of manager at the time, and he's helped us fund the first demo that we'd done, the first demo tape. He was managing us and getting us gigs and possibly keeping the money so we could pay him back from the gigs that he was getting us. But he was getting us some really good gigs, things that were coming into the Polytechnic all the time. So we got us the Stone Roses gig at the same time. At this time, they still had Cressa with them, so it was the Stone Roses one of the first tours promoting the Stone Roses album. We've been friends with Manny ever since from there. I met Ian Brown a few times afterwards. Actually bumped into him in the Monkey House in Chester. Which, you know what I like, because they used to call it like have a monkey walk or something. What are you doing here? Come to see the bambo. Manny is just, every time he sees you, he gives you a big hug and kiss, you know what I mean? Even it's like you're really close mates, but you're not really, but he's a lovely fella.
And their first big break came after a gig supporting the Lars at the Hardman House in Liverpool, a gig at which Diggsy was performing with them on the piano.
As I said before, the Sean Morgan was getting us a lot of gigs. We'd sold our rehearsal room to the Lars, our rehearsal room lease to the Lars, and we'd become really good friends after that. They were doing a big show in Liverpool at the time at the Hardman House Hotel.
Yeah, the Hardman House.
It's just called the Hardman House in Liverpool. And asked us to do the support for them.
Yeah, and it was when we were supporting the Lars on that gig. A guy called Jeff Abbott approached us, wanting to be our manager, and turns out he became our manager, and subsequently through him being our manager, he got us a major recording contract with CBS.
Jeff Abbott, a manager from Manchester, was in the audience, and after hearing their set that night, he set them up multiple showcases in front of major record labels. And so, following one of these, the band signed to CBS Records and Publishing in December 1989, and they were officially in business. The first thing the record label did was to give them a massive advance of many thousands of pounds, with which they were supposed to go to Wales and rehearse. It was a very different music industry back then, in which young, probably fairly irresponsible bands were just given a huge pile of cash, and the label just hoped they would do what they were told with it. Of course, the real people did not.
When we've got the record deal, which was a good record deal and a publishing deal, so it was the first time we come into some money, we decided, the record company asked us to go down to somewhere and rehearse and do some demos and stuff like that, but we never.
In January 1990, they blew their advance on taking the whole band plus friends, girlfriends, managers and the whole entourage on holiday to Goa in India, where they attended all-night raves and full moon parties on the beaches.
So 10 of our mates, our girlfriends, our managers, stuff like this, and I went to a place called Goa, which a lot of people hadn't heard of in 1990. And then it was an eye-opener because although we'd been to raves in Liverpool and stuff like that, we hadn't heard this sort of music we were listening to over in these like full moon parties over in Goa.
With it being so hot out there, all the vinyl records all melt, so everything was kind of done on
cassette and stuff like that. So yeah, even though we've been to India and we were getting a bit more psychedelic, we come back, so it just opened our eyes to when we recorded a new album to go with a few different genres. So you know what I mean, that was great.
When they got back to the UK, the work started properly. They went to the Pink Museum, the same studio where Oasis recorded Supersonic, and started work on their first album. The first single from their debut album was called Windowpane, which came out in 1990 and is now their best known song.
Where was it recorded? It was recorded in
St Nicholas at Wales, a little village.
Oh, there's a great studio called Impact by Margate. It was a fantastic residential studio. The guy whose wife run the studio, she was a French chef, so amazing food, a big outdoor swimming pool.
I'm actually, I've got a record deal and I'm in the swimming pool. The only thing that's missing now is a Rolls Royce.
12 months before we were on the Dole and Bootle, you know what I mean? And next minute we're in swimming pools down in the lovely part of England.
The album itself was released shortly afterwards in 1991 to widespread positive reviews, and the Reillys started touring to promote the album and the singles. In this time, the band also played at multiple festivals, including Glastonbury and Reading, and they started getting noticed on the international stage, which led to tours in France, Japan, and the USA.
Yeah, there's a bit of a funny story about an artist called Björk. We were playing in the Nevada desert. I'm sure Nirvana were on the same bill. But it turned out it was my 21st birthday at the time of doing the gig. And we got bought a few presents, which, let's just say, we mind-altering presents. I got asked to do an interview for MTV with Björk. And I goes up to meet her and I was in a really friendly mood. And I went, all right, love. I said, what's your name? I'm Chris, you know what I mean? Nice to meet you. It's going to be weird doing this interview for MTV, innit? I said, what's your name? And she just goes, yeah. I went, what? She goes, yeah. And I thought she was like making a frog noise or something, so I went like that back to her. Yeah. And she goes, I don't like you, get out of my face. I was like, we've got to do an interview now, so I don't like you. And I went, oh wait.
We were playing in Minneapolis, and Prince happened to own a club in Minneapolis. We were playing on the Prince's club the next night, and in walks Prince with these two big, massive black security guards. I thought, oh, there's Prince over there. I've got a really good idea. I'll go over and I'll say to him, I'm going to bound from Liverpool, we're playing here tomorrow. If you're around, can you come and check us out? I just looked at them and I thought, Scouse accent, he's not going to understand a single word to say. He looked at me, I just wanted give the peace sign. He gave me the peace sign back and I just turned around and walked
away. The best one was though, the record company we were signed to in America at the time, this woman who was with us, she was like that. You want to meet Prince? I can get you to meet Prince. You know, it's alright, love, just being over at sound, you know what I mean? So, no, I can get you to meet Prince. I know him. So he walks over and she goes, hi Prince, these two big security guards grab her by the arms and throw her out the club. We're like, we never do
Once touring was completed, the Reillys began working on their second album, which was titled Marshmallow Lane. They were recording at Maison Rouge Studios in London.
When we were recording Marshmallow Lane, we got to be really good friends with Blair. We recorded in Maison Rouge and they were in Studio 1, we were in Studio 2. And we had some great nights with them, went to like loads of parties and stuff like that. Their record company parties, our record company parties, new sounds. So we had some really nice nights with them.
And so, the band continued to tour, supporting the Pixies in the UK and France. The Real People also supported a Manchester band called the Inspiral Carpets, and while out on tour with them, they got friendly with one of their roadies, a young Manc lad called Noel Gallagher. Eventually, their second album, Marshmallow Lane, was completed, but it had been a very, very expensive venture.
Our first gigs were in like Marsh Lane Community Centre when we first started, so that's why Marshmallow Lane, that's where it come from.
They only released one single from the second album, a song called Believer, which entered the UK Top 40 Singles chart.
When we finished recording Marshmallow Lane, we got asked to do some gigs in America. Things were going really, really well at the time, and but when we got back from the States, there was all different people in the record company because they basically had a personnel change. The people who had signed us to the record label had all been sacked. And subsequently, that meant that our days were numbered, and the single got released, but it had no video to it.
The person who signed us was no longer our A&R person. The person who was the head of A&R was a guy called Muff Winwood. He's retired, so the whole company had just changed, and our unrecouped balance was rising and raising because when we were recording Marshmallow Lane, some of it we recorded in Air Studios, George Martin's studio. Things that we didn't know, some of the producers were getting in, big orchestras, Welsh choirs.
All of this goes on your bill, you know.
Which we didn't know, that was even without our permission, do you know what I mean? So we go down to it, have a listen to a mix, and it all sound full orchestra and choirs everywhere. I'm going, well done. We never left it like this, we've just been in America. So our bill was quite high, and they must have been looking and saying, to recoup this, we're going to have to sell so many million records or wherever it was. And so I said, just let it go.
Marshmallow Lane was shelved permanently, and the Real People were dropped from the label so that project, which had been quite expensive, could be used as a tax write-off.
With it being a bit ahead of its time, the record company, it wasn't as poppy for them enough, was it?
A good few years later, that was what all the Britpop and everything. That was the sound at the time, but but it was too late. That maybe because they'd already sacked us, and the album didn't get released. So it's just all timing in the music business. 10% talent and 90% luck.
And so the Real People and CBS parted company. Rhythm guitarist Sean Simpson also moved on from the band at this point. However, following their bad luck with the record label, some good luck was just around the corner. Without the Griffiths brothers knowing, their old publishing company sold one of Tony's old songs to Cher, a track called One by One. Now, the Real People had already released this as an indie single in 1987, but Cher released a pop reworking of it, which became a worldwide hit, peaking at number 7 in the UK singles charts.
Kind of wrote it all at once when I was about 18. It's just the whole thing. But we weren't sort of a proper band or anything at the time. We just had the demo, and
we had in the studio produced a few demos and singles.
Yeah.
But the guy who signed us wanted to sign a publishing on that song was a guy called, what was his name?
Lucien Grange.
A guy called Lucien Grange, who years and years later was the MD of whatever, Warner's or something like that, who Cher was signed to, and she was looking for new songs for a new album. And he's always loved this song. Just without us knowing, got Cher to demo it and cover it, and next one it was a single without us knowing. So it was great at the time, like.
And so, while the real people were kind of struggling a bit at this point, Tony and Chris were beginning to emerge as professional songwriters. The Reallys moved to a new rehearsal space in Porter Street, Liverpool, and it was there that they brought Oasis in the very earliest days to record their live demonstration tape.
Okay, this is 15 Porter Street. This was the tour where we used to go in. That's where we used to load all the equipment in. And then this little bit here was the control room. That was it. That was the way the studio was. We used to own upstairs as well. Upstairs we had like a little office, a little weights and punch bags and stuff like that. To let a little bit of our frustration out sometimes. And that's where we used to chill and have a laugh.
After their time working alongside Oasis, the band started recording their third album, What's on the Outside, once again at Pink Museum Studios in Liverpool. Midway through recording, however, drummer Tony Elson also left the band, and so Tony and Chris brought in Gary Ford on drums and Alan Gillibrand on guitar. They set up their own label, Egg Records, and released the third album with help from MGL. Following the release of What's on the Outside, they toured extensively once again, playing with Oasis at Liverpool Royal Court and at the Glasgow Cat House. They then joined Ocean Colour Scene on the Moseley Shoals tour and continued supporting them on tour for several years to come.
First time we met Paul Weller, we were supporting Ocean Colour Scene because we just started supporting them on all their tours. The Moseley Shoals tour we joined first, and then we toured with them constantly for over 2 or 3 years.
Well, they used to support us when we first started, and then when we were out of contract with being the good lads they are, they probably looked after us, took us on tour with them. We didn't have any money at the time because we didn't have a deal. They even lent us their old tour bus.
A tour bus that we subsequently crashed.
Yeah.
But they were sound about it.
Steve Clancy said, it actually looks better.
It looks better, mate. The first time we met Paul Weller, we were playing, we were doing one of these big gigs with them anyway because it was going really well. And we were sound checking, and Paul Weller turns up, he joined the tour to like get up with them because he'd been recording on Moseley shows and stuff. And we were sound checking, and he comes up to us at the end of the sound check and he said, you guys sound brilliant. He said, any chance that I can get up and play with you? So we were like, well, what should we play? You don't know none of our songs, and he just met us.
We just had the jams.
So we had the jam, we done a cover of a band song of the band. So we just had a little blues jam in there. And it went down, but it was great for our gigs for being a support band, because one minute Steve Craddock was playing piano with us at the time on a track called Rainer's Lane and maybe a few other things. So we'd invite Steve Craddock on the stage, and the crowd would give her a big cheer, and then when he'd finished we'd go, and there's another good friend of ours, although we'd only just met him that night, Mr. Paul Weller, and the crowd would just go off. After that he'd give us a few gigs just supporting Paul Weller, which we played like Crystal Palace and stuff like that with him.
Chris and Tony also sang backing vocals on the next Ocean Colour Scene album, specifically on the songs Prophet in Peace and I Am the News. And, with the ties between the two bands becoming so strong, Ocean Colour Scene went on to actually record a cover of a Real People song called Start of the Day. And the Real People actually did some recording at the legendary Moseley Shoals studio, owned by Ocean Colour Scene, which sadly now has been sold to the local council, bulldozed, and is just a car park. As time went on, the touring continued, and the Real People began supporting bigger and bigger acts.
Yeah, Meatloaf, we've done about 3 tours with Meatloaf, played the Albert Hall with them, stuff like that. What it was at this time, started our own label called Egg Records. We were getting the release through MGL. Ocean Colour Scene were looking after us. We'd done the Oasis stuff. We were gigging with Paul Weller. The album hadn't really sold well or something, but as a cult band, we were doing really well. We were getting good gigs. So we had a few agents who were sort of like fighting for us. So next minute someone would go, do you want to go and play with Meatloaf? I've got like 5 gigs here, 4 gigs there, all like really big gigs. They might not be in our sort of audience, but we just love playing. Like that, yeah, we do that next week. Well, he got a Meatloaf. Do you want to fancy playing with Bowie? Like that, yeah, we'll play with Bowie. So
Simple Minds as well.
Simple Minds, Nelly Furtado at the time, all things that weren't really our genre. Yeah, Meatloaf was crazy. He was a fantastic showman.
He literally died on stage nearly every night because he put that much effort into his show, and he's asthmatic.
Fantastic showman.
Yeah, brilliant.
However, as touring came to a close once more, the band also parted ways with record label MGL, who had been helping them to release their stuff. They also lost their new rhythm guitarist and their drummer, and so phase one of the band was over. At this point, Tony and Chris began focusing primarily on writing songs for other artists. And during this new phase of their careers, they had a string of hits for other artists on which they were credited as writers. They wrote the song You're So Right For Me for the band Rooster, which hit number 14 in the UK. They wrote the song Out of My Heart Into Your Head for BB Mac, which hit 56 in the United States, 22 in Canada and 19 in New Zealand. They also wrote tracks for Atomic Kitten, which featured on albums and on each band member's solo albums. But at this point, Chris and Tony realised that they were moving a bit too far for comfort into the pop world, and they realised that the time had come to restart the Real People once again.
The fourth album that we released was called Think Positive. That was recorded in the studio and just released through our own label, through Townsend Music.
And it was called Think Positive because the last thing that Anand said to us before she died was Think Positive.
She held out both our hands and just said, Think Positive, boys. Yeah. And it was a really good statement. That's brought us no luck.
Their fourth album, Think Positive, was made, and at this time enough time had passed since their first record contract that the long-lost second album, Marshmallow Lane, legally passed back into their ownership, and it was finally released 25 years after it had been recorded and shelved. And on that record was the song Feel the Pain, from which Noel Gallagher had lifted a huge chunk for the chorus of Don't Go Away on Be Here Now. And ironically, following the release of Marshmallow Lane, that song, Feel the Pain, became the second most listened to Real People song, probably because of the Noel Gallagher controversy.
All the songs reverted back to us and the recordings and that as well. We had the rights to actually release it ourselves.
Yeah, we just released it on our own small label, which you can get all of our records through Townsend Music.
And so, this brings us into phase two of The Real People, where we still are.
The band's still going to this day. We just had a few albums out over the last 10, 12 years. The last album we released was called Monday Morning Breakdown.
Because all of our publishing, all of our songs and our recordings that we have all reverted back to us, we've got quite a lot of unreleased stuff. I think we've got us about four albums.
Demos.
That is getting in the process of getting released. We're going to get back into our studio and start making something brand new.
The band are still together and gigging as much as possible around the UK. And I expect they probably will be for as long as they possibly can.
Okay folks, this is The Real People. Thanks for watching. See you all later. Nice one. Ta-ra.
Perfect.